Welcome to One Conversations, where we talk about some of the latest articles in one magazine. It's a Better Together podcast. And so today we're talking about an article from the October-November 2021 magazine. It is entitled Sabbath Rest. It's by Miss Elizabeth Hodges, the director of WNAC, or the Free Will Baptist Women's Ministry. So Miss Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today for this One Conversation.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, now you don't sound to be glad to be here. So what, do you need a Sabbath rest? Is that what I'm hearing?
Of course. I would tell you, like Paul, I have not attained, but I'm pressing toward the mark.
There you go. Well, your whole life have been boom, boom, on the go, haven't you?
I have. Growing up as a PK, my dad had two speeds, wide open and shut down.
Yes.
And he kept us busy. But I think as I think about rest, I go all the way back to high school. At that time at our church, the youth had Monday night Bible study. We had Tuesday night visitation, Wednesday night prayer service, Friday or Saturday night youth activity, which meant all day Sunday because I was on the Bible Bowl team, and we practiced every Sunday afternoon. So we were there more nights of the week than we were home. And so taking college prep classes and writing a lot of term papers and reading a lot of extra literature books, that's when I first remember just no downtime. I'm sure it probably was worse for those of us who were on Bible Bowl because other people had Sunday afternoon, if that makes sense.
Yes.
But I wouldn't trade that for anything. I love that I was able to do that. But that started it. And then, of course, I came to college and took 15 to 20 hours and worked that many or more to pay the bills. And then, thankfully, God helped me graduate. And then married a preacher and became not the PK, but the pastor's wife. I also was an educator, and so the path that God had for me didn't allow a lot of time, but He established Sabbath rest in Genesis chapter 1, so I am responsible that rhythm didn't come into my life. I think for pastors, families, when the pastor is under duress or stress, the family feels that, especially the wife. And so I was thinking about this last night with COVID. You know, the pastors have had to step out of their comfort zone and do things they've never had to do before. And I am very grateful for them and very thankful on behalf of all the women for what they've done. But that added a level of stress most of them were not comfortable with or used to or knowing how to deal with. And if your family has a death, that's your family's death. But if there are 3 or 4 in the church, the pastor is carrying the weight of all of that grief. Or if there's surgeries in the church, it's not just one family. He's carrying it for every family, and the wife shares that load. So I think just by nature of ministry, it's hard. It's 24/7. And if you're not intentional about taking those times to be still and quiet, you just go 90 to nothing. So when Mother's health broke, the doctor called all of us in and he said, and she was very ill, he said, her illness is a result of 50 years of stress. That's ministry.
Yeah.
And I should have learned from that, but I did not. And I remember when our daughter went to college and came back, she was very determined about her Sabbath routine. And she kept telling me, Mother, you got to stop. You got to stop. And I did not until I had a little friend visit me from international travel who stopped me dead in my tracks. And I remember the day the doctor looked at me and he said, Elizabeth, I can give you medicine to take care of this parasite. but I cannot give you rest. You got to build in rest to your schedule. Well, I was a director at that point, and we travel, and our schedules are busy, and they're booked solid. But everything came to a screeching halt. And it was just a good time for me to just recognize, okay, this is not, I can do more for the Lord if my body is rested than when my body is exhausted. And so I think what I would love to tell my 20-year-old self is you need carved out time. And it's not going to be on Sunday.
Yeah.
For a pastor's family, it is not going to be on Sunday. And for most of us, I think true Sabbath rest, when your body just really can reset, it takes more than an afternoon a week or maybe even a day a week because of the constant pressure. But how many of our pastors and their families' vacation is going to see grandma because that's the only time you've got?
Yeah.
And though that's great, that's not really a time just to be alone and unwind. So I would love to see our churches help our pastor families, knowing if they can go into the situation knowing this is hard. It's hard for a pastor's family to say, we need to get away.
Yeah.
We just need to get away as a family and reboot. What would happen if our deacons or our leadership teams would come and say, Pastor, you haven't had a vacation in X months. We want you to go and get away with your family. What a gift that would be. Rather than, I know how hard it would have been for Daddy or Eddie to either one go and say, guys, I've got to get away. Because they carry the weight of the ministry.
Yes.
And they do it because they're called to do it, and they do it with joy, but they still have a physical body. And then the mental strain and stress of carrying all those weights. And God will rejuvenate us. He will reorder our steps. But we got to be still and quiet for that to happen. And for some people, for me, I love to go to the beach and just hear the waves. I don't really love to get in the water. Play with the grandkids, yes, but I mean, that's not what, it's just that rocking sound of the waves that just calms my spirit. But I love to go to the mountains and just see the creative beauty. Well, someone else might rather go somewhere else. It's just, where could your pastor's family go and just have some rejuvenation time where they aren't the pastor? Somebody's not even going to know that's their line of work. They're just there as a guest. So that would be my desire for our denomination, that our leadership would take care of our pastors, because I don't see their load getting easier. I mean, this is all I've ever known in my 66 years. And I saw my parents under a huge amount of stress. But I think the stress now is different because of all the cultural things that are just in our face due to technology, which wasn't part of my parents' ministry and not part of the early years of our ministry. But for our pastors right now, they're getting it from all sides.
Yeah.
And they've got to take care of themselves.
They do. So really, your article is kind of two-pronged. It talks about your situation, but so any pastor families that are listening, what you're saying is you got to do it. It's hard. You got to have your place at the beach, and not your own place. You got to
have some place to go.
You got to get to the beach if that's your thing, or the mountains, or wherever. You got to figure that out. I've got to have that time. Know it's okay. You kind of at the end there alluded to technology and how you can be at the beach or in the mountains, but not be at the beach or the mountains. So you're saying you got to have those technology breaks. Yeah, unwind.
I mean, I know for me, when we get to go off, I tell Phyllis, I said, I will check emails first thing in the morning, and then it's not going to be on the rest of the day.
That's great.
I'm going to be with my children and grandchildren. And when I was an educator, I did that to a point, but it was a little bit easier to just say, okay, I've done all the things I can do to prep for the school year, and now I'm going off. Where with ministry, you're still connected because if they need you, they need you.
Yeah,
but you don't have to have it on. It doesn't have to be attached to your body. You can lay it aside. And for me, I read. That's one of the things I love to do. And just read, again, not necessarily for learning, but for resting.
Yes.
You know, and I think we have to give ourselves permission for those things.
So pastor families listen to that and figure that out, and it's okay. And there are times when catastrophic things do happen, and you can't, but then you're going to have to unwind later. You're going to have some time later. But then I also like what you were saying. Really, this is something church leaders, deacons, leaders in the church need to think about and say, okay, well, Pastor, we want you and your family to do X, and also just kind of convey. I had a fellow in my church, you might have known him, J.P. Seeley.
Oh, yes, I love Brother Seeley.
He would say, don't call him about that. You know, like if I was on vacation or whatever, we had some of those good deacons that if they had known, you know, that they knew, you know, he needs a break at this point, we'll talk about that when he gets back, or let us help you about that until then. So those leaders sure do make a difference for pastors.
Well, I sort of feel it's sort of like the passage in Exodus where Aaron and Hur came and lifted Moses' arms. Moses needed help, but they're the ones who recognized it and came to him. If your deacons and your leadership come to you, to me, as the child and the wife, it looks like it gives the pastor permission.
Yes.
And know that the church people are going to be cared for while they're gone. Yes, if it's major, they're going to call, but not everybody's going to call, and not everybody's going to just do what is normal in their routine. And that would be my heart's desire, that these people would step up and look at it maybe differently than they ever have. Because if you haven't been in ministry, you may not really understand how this 24/7 is really 24/7.
Right.
You go to bed with it. You wake up in the middle of the night trying to help solve things. And I'm not the counselor, you are, but I just know from experience, you try to figure out, well, how could I better help that person? And they're in the midst of this, and who could maybe I connect with them? So your mind is going, I feel like the little hamster in the cage.
Yeah,
It just
doesn't
and sometimes
stop.
you just say, Lord, would you help it to stop?
Yes.
So I can sleep. And I think if our people see that and come alongside, the pastor doesn't feel like he's carrying it by himself.
Right. And sticking with your Moses analogy, you know, he had Jethro, and you go back and read that chapter, and Moses basically says all is great, and then Jethro watches, says, no, it's not. He says, this is not good for you nor for them.
Right.
So that's another place, you know, as a church leader, you kind of watch and like, well, someone else could do this, or you know, someone could take this burden from you.
And I know as a pastor's wife, many times me, have taken jobs that needed to be done at the church because somebody thought we should, or because no one would, and it needed to be done for our husbands. But I wonder, looking back, did God have somebody else that needed to do that? And they needed to step into that role. So I think for us, we have to ask ourselves, is that what God wants me to do?
Mm-hmm.
Or does he want me to come alongside and help mentor somebody to do that?
Yes.
Who may not really feel confident, but just needs a little bit of assurance
Needs
rather
some
than
time.
saying, okay, I'll just do that. And that's hard.
Yeah.
When you see your husband needs it done, and what do? You just kind of get it done. So it's not on his plate.
Yes. So there's definitely all of us need to be doing something,
Right.
in our churches. And I used to tell my people, if you see something and you sense it needs to be done, it may be you that need to do it, or
Right.
I mean, it's maybe the Lord kind of speaking to you and saying, here's something that may be kind of your thing, or your calling, or the Lord may have even gifted you to do that a little bit. So you're saying if people do step up, that helps everybody have a little bit of a Sabbath rest, and especially your leaders.
Right. Well, and if you think about, let's talk about education, since you and I both know that well. A lot of classroom teachers do have some time in the summer when they can unwind.
Yes.
Not that they're totally off in the summer, because you and I both know that doesn't happen. But if you think about corporate America, their vacation time builds the longer they're with a company.
Mm-hmm.
Does that happen in the ministry very often?
Oh, yeah.
But
Good.
you see, even something that small, if your pastor's been at your church a long time, have you increased the time he can be off to do this?
Right.
I think we just have to rethink how we take care of our preachers, because people burn out.
Yeah, and back to your education analogy, that's when new syllabi are developed, new classes,
Exactly.
they're off, but they're not really off, but it gives them a chance sometimes to read some things they want to read, and that's
Take a
good for
trip they
pastors.
want to take.
Yes.
You
yes.
know, I can remember taking things to our family vacation that had to be done, but because I was doing it on my own time and nobody was interrupting, it was different than that pressure of, oh, I'm here, and I think
Yes.
I think that changing of setting is huge as well. And I would just encourage our pastors, you may not can do a week, you may not can do a weekend, but carve out some time
Yes.
so that you can stay encouraged, because you give and give and give and give and give, but something has to be given back to you.
That's great. Well, thank you for writing this article, and thank you for sharing with us today. And thank you to our listeners for listening in. We encourage you to get a hard copy of One Magazine. You can subscribe at onemagazine.org. You can also see a digital copy of the magazine there. I encourage you to take this article, share it on your personal social media sites. Share this podcast. Like it if you do. If you don't, maybe then don't.
That's right.
Yeah.
We are just, I think we just have to know we're in transition.
We are.
Perfection died on Calvary, so we just keep pressing toward the mark.
That's right. And any little thing folks do, it really does
Great.
help. It
Right.
does. So thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
And God bless all of you. Thank you, listeners, for joining us as well.